Howdy, I'm Andy Lee with Family History Fanatics, and have you wondered how old your chromosomes are? You're probably thinking, well, I'm 45, so my chromosomes must be 45 years old. Well, today we're going to see what the maximum age chromosomes could be. So when we think about the maximum age, we might be thinking, okay, who's the oldest person? And that person, I believe, is somewhere around 125 years old, which is pretty old. But actually, our chromosomes can be a lot older, because what I'm talking about is the sequence that makes up that chromosome. Now, that was created at some point and then passed down. Normally, when we're talking about chromosomes, we have to remember a couple of things. First off, there's two of every one of our chromosomes. Now, except for the sex chromosomes, if you're male, you might have an X and a Y, whereas females will have an X and an X. But for all of the other autosomes, 1 through 22, you have two copies of them. One is from your mother and one is from your father. So you have a maternal and a paternal chromosome. They might not look much different at all between them if you had them right in front of you, but one of them was from your mom and one of them was from your dad. Now, most chromosomes recombine before being passed on to children. What that means is that these two chromosomes, they swap different parts, so that this new chromosome that's passed on to the child is actually a combination of the maternal and the paternal chromosome from that particular parent. Really, the chromosomes you get are a combination of actually the grandparent chromosomes that were passed down to your father and to your mother. It gets a little confusing because you have a maternal and a paternal chromosome with your father, and you have a maternal and paternal chromosome with your mother, and they get mixed together to get your paternal and maternal chromosomes. One thing to remember, though, is that sometimes these chromosomes may be passed on without recombining. In other words, your father may pass on his maternal chromosome to you and have no part of that paternal chromosome that he had that corresponds to it. Likewise, it can happen with your mother as well. So when I'm talking about the maximum age of chromosomes, I want to see how many generations could unrecombined chromosomes be passed on. In other words, this chromosome is created at some point in the past, some generations back, and it is passed on as, let's say, a maternal chromosome or a paternal chromosome to the child. And then that child also passes on that unrecombined chromosome to their children, and then to their children, on and on. And so you can see that the chromosome may be a lot older. In other words, when that newborn baby is born with their unique set of chromosomes, one or more of those chromosomes may actually be, who knows, a couple hundred years old? Let's find out. So, in order to see whether you have unrecombined chromosomes, you need to be able to look at a grandparent and a grandchild. So not everybody's going to be able to do this because you have to have had your grandparents tested. Now, in my case, I actually have my children tested and I have my grandparents tested. So I can look at not just grandparent and grandchild, but I can look at great-grandparent and great-grandchild, which is going to eliminate some more options as far as chromosomes, but it gives us an extra generation of unrecombined chromosomes that may be passed on. So let's take a look at this. It turns out that between my grandmother and one of my children, they have an unrecombined chromosome on chromosome number 22. In other words, that chromosome was passed from my grandmother to my father, and it might have been recombined there, but my father received that, and my father passed it on to me unrecombined, and I passed it on to my kids unrecombined. So my father passed on his maternal chromosome, number 22, unrecombined, and I passed on my paternal chromosome, because I got it from my father, number 22, unrecombined, to this child. What's even more interesting is I actually have a second child that also has that exact same unrecombined chromosome. Pretty cool. So 2 of my kids have this unrecombined chromosome from me, which was from my father, which was from my grandmother. So let's draw this out a little bit. My grandma Jeanette passed this chromosome on to my dad, Russ. He passed the exact copy of what he got from his mother to me. I passed on this exact copy to two of my kids, which is cool because that's basically two generations that we know of that pass this on unrecombined. Now, I said that you have to be able to have tested your grandparents. Well, there's also another way that you can actually see whether or not a chromosome is unrecombined, and that is through the use of visual phasing or segment phasing. I have several videos on this channel where I go over visual phasing and segment phasing. Basically, you need to have at least, we'll say, you and one half sibling. Preferably, you have at least two siblings. You can have 5 or 6 or 7 siblings is fine. You can do this. And you can be able to find out from the grandparents which chromosomes might have been unrecombined. So I have this worksheet that I've done. And on this, B is my dad. So whenever you're seeing B there, that is my dad. So this is really the place that we're looking at. And what we can see here is we can see that my dad has one of his chromosome number 22s that has a recombination point in it. And that is his paternal chromosome, the garnet green line. But he has a chromosome number 22 with Bell all the way across, which is his maternal chromosome. And by the fact that it is Bell all the way across, that means he received this chromosome unrecombined from his mother. So it's actually his mother's maternal chromosome. Let's map that out again. So Jeanette's mother is Nellie. She passed on a chromosome to her daughter, chromosome number 22. Now that chromosome might be recombined, it might not be recombined, we don't know. But what we do know now through visual phasing is that Jeanette passed on an unrecombined chromosome to Russ, and we already found out that Russ had passed on an unrecombined to me, and I had passed on that unrecombined chromosome to my two kids. So we've got 3 generations now that this chromosome number 22 has been passed down unrecombined. That's pretty neat because now we can do some math here. We know that Jeanette was born in 1925. If the chromosome that Nellie passed on to Jeanette was a recombined chromosome, then at that point in time, 1924, 1925, when that chromosome was created, we have a new chromosome sequence created. Basically, a chromosome was born. And that chromosome now has been passed on to my dad, to me, and to both of my kids in its exact form. Which means that chromosome number 22, when my two kids are born, now they're, less than 20 years old each, that chromosome is already 96 years old. So it is much older than either one of my sons who are carrying it. And what's really cool is if they have children and chromosome number 22 gets passed on to them unrecombined, that is going to just increase the age. We're going to extend that to another generation. So 2 of my kids have a chromosome that is at least 96 years old and possibly even older. Unfortunately, there's not a way right now to determine whether Nellie's chromosome is unrecombined or not. How old? What's really the maximum age that this chromosome could be, or any chromosome for that matter? I already know that it's got to be at least 96 years old because I have an example right here in my family of a chromosome that is 96 years old. Well, we can do some math, and chromosome number 22 has about a 36% chance of not recombining. All right, so let's go back to our map. And what we can see from this is that if we go backwards, Jeanette to Russ has a 36% chance. 36 times 36% means I only have a 13% chance of having that unrecombined chromosome. And we times that by another 36% and we get 5% for my kids. So if we take this and we turn it into a math problem, what we really want to see is 36% to some power is going to equal, and I'm just going to pull out 1 in a billion. And I'll use that as the baseline of what it is. Now, I know there's more than 1 billion people here on Earth today, but just as we go back in time, you only have to go back a couple hundred years until there was only 1 billion people here on Earth. And we're going to be talking about ages that are beyond that. Plugging this into your calculator, plugging this into Excel, you actually get about 20 generations. Now, depending on how long each of those generations is, somewhere, let's say, between 25 years and 40 years, is going to give you the maximum age of that chromosome. In other words, when that chromosome sequence was created. And what we find from that is that the maximum age for chromosome number 22 is 500 to 800 years. So basically, all the chromosome number 22s on planet Earth right now were created within the last 800 years. In other words, about 1200 AD. Pretty interesting, I think. Now we can go through and we can actually look at the other chromosomes because they have slightly different rates of not recombining. Chromosome number 21 is actually potential to be a much older chromosome from about 600 to 950 years. It doesn't recombine as much. Now we can get to some of the others, and 19 and 20, there can be about 400 to 600 years old. 13 to 18 could be 300 to 600 years old. And then we get to our much longer chromosomes, which can recombine a lot more often. And you can see that all the way down to chromosome number 1 and 2, well, the maximum age for those is 150 to 250 years. And really it's because you'd have to go through 5 or 6 generations of these big long chromosomes not recombining. It's very rare. And so you're probably not going to see that. Now, most of our chromosomes, like I said, are going to recombine. It is a unusual instance when you have a chromosome unrecombined that also gets passed on to another generation unrecombined, and even more rare to have it passed on once again. So if you're looking for chromosomes that have unrecombined, you probably want to look at the 19s, 20s, 21, 22s. Those are the most likely to not recombine. And you can see they are the ones that have the potential to be a few hundred years old, all the way up to almost 1,000 years old for chromosome number 21. And that theoretically then is the maximum age that any one of your chromosome sequences could be. Like I said, most people's chromosomes are actually unique because they are a recombined chromosome from your mom and your dad that they pass on to you. Now, if you would like to learn something about recombination rates, you can watch this video up top here. But if you want to learn something more about genetic genealogy, then watch this video down below. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and if you'd like to join FHF Extra, I was about to say FHF Fanatics, but FHF Extra, we have even more videos and monthly webinars for you.